Good morning, everyone. We will be studying this week the Torah portion of Metzora. We're studying from the book Selections from Lekutei Sichot, the first talk for Metzora. Just a very brief introduction. The laws of discoloration, I'm not using the word leprosy because leprosy is contagious. This is not contagious, has nothing to do. Also, it is a particular color and it only applies to garments, homes, and humans. If it happens on the car, if it happens on synthetics, if it happens on plastic, it doesn't apply. The Torah dedicates two portions to these discoloration laws, Tazria last week and Metzora. Many years we read them together. This year it's separate. And that is going to be the topic, the order, and why is it broken into two portions. Let's read. The order in which the Torah presents the laws of Tzora'as, blemishes, is extremely perplexing. Initially, in Parshas Tazria, last week's Torah portion, the Torah outlines the particular laws applying to Tzora'as blemishes that appears on a person's body as well as those that appear on garments. Last week, the Torah discussed blemishes, tzora'at, on humans and on garments. However, it leaves the treatment of the subject incomplete, only listing the laws relevant to the blemishes themselves. A, which blemishes bring about impurity and which do not, and B, when and how a judgment regarding the reattainment of purity can be rendered. However, the laws relevant to the purification from these blemishes are not mentioned there. Only afterwards, in the subsequent Torah reading, Parshat Metzora, this week Torah portion, does the Torah return to the subject of tzora'at blemishes on a person, stating, these are the instructions pertaining to a person afflicted by tzora'at on the day of his purification, explaining the order to be followed by such a person on the day of his purification. The two birds and other items must be brought, a specific purification procedures followed, and then sacrifices offered. So first, last week's Torah portion is dealing with two of the three, excluding homes, only garments and humans. What colors, what size, what happened if it's not growing, if it's shrinking, hair, how much hair, if the entire body, etc. The Torah then is dealing with the details of what defines it pure, impure, how long, how many weeks, how much the person needs to be out of the Jewish camp. That's one. The Torah excluded the purification process, and he's dealing with it only in this week, that he has to bring two birds as two sin offering. He has to bring a little mold, a little growth from the green that grows between rocks. What do you call it? Moss. Moss. He needs to bring a little bit moss and few other leaves, and he brings it together, and they sprinkle water with them on the man, and then it becomes pure. All those details are enumerated in this week's Torah portion, not last week. After the passage describing the laws pertaining to a person afflicted by tzora'as on the day of his purification, in other words, in this week's Torah portion, after dealing with the process of purifying a human, the Torah relates a passage concerning tzora'as blemishes that appears on the walls of a house. Now the Torah go back to the third category of homes. That passage includes both the laws governing the definition of the blemishes of and the order to be followed when purifying the house. Bringing two birds, slaughtering them, etc., in a sequence similar to that which enables a person's purification from tzora'at blemishes of the body. Several questions arise. Says the Rebbe, now when the Torah is talking about home that became impure, the Torah immediately after tells us what happened, how do you purify the home, and you bring sacrifices and sprinkling, etc. Number one, A, Why does the Torah divide the laws pertaining to a person who contracted Tzorahas and list them in two separate Torah readings, defining the blemishes in Parshat Tazria, but speaking about their purification in Parshat Metzora, instead of combining them in the same Torah reading? That's a first. Also, why is an interruption made between defining the blemishes and describing their purification by inserting the laws pertaining to Tzorah blemishes on garments? So the rabbi is asking one question: why divide the package of human discoloration or Tzorahas to last week and this week? In addition, in between, it's broken with the laws of blemishes to garments. It just doesn't make sense. The order should be learn about what defines it or not, learn about purifying it, and then you move to the garments. Here we have the garments in between, and then you break it to two portions. Only in the Holy Land? I think so. No rhyme or reason, except the homes, the Torah tells us. Actually, there is a reason. Lashon hara. The details have no rhyme or reason, particular color, etc., size, etc. But the question is a very simple one. You need to teach us what defines or not and how you wait, etc. Teach us how you purify it. How do you get rid of it and go back to the community? Instead, you breaking in between with garments. In addition, why is it coming the following portion? It should be in that same portion. Yes.
Does the word purifying, does it encompass the treatment of the Tzorahas itself?
There is no treatment to be done. It's all spiritual.
It's all spiritual.
You don't go to a doctor, you don't get a cream or ointment.
Gotcha.
There's nothing.
Gotcha.
Person who looks at this.
That's it.
Keep your mouth shut, yes. Last week we spoke that an expert should look, but the Kohen will define if it's pure or not pure. Can we continue?
Yeah.
Number 2 question. Why is the section describing tzara'at blemishes on walls of houses stated after the laws of the purification of a person afflicted by tzara'at and not earlier? At the end of Parshas Tazria, in continuation of the laws applying to tzara'at blemishes on a person's body and garments. Last week, we talked about 2 out of 3, the blemishes that will apply, human and garments. Teach us the third one. Instead, the Torah takes a break to purify a man and then goes back to walls of a house. C. Why are tzara'at blemishes that affect houses different from those that affect humans? The purification process of houses through the procedure involving the birds, etc., is mentioned directly after the laws regarding the definition of the purity of and impurity of the blemishes themselves. By contrast, the laws regarding the definitions of the blemishes of a person and those regarding the purification process are listed separately as mentioned above. The Rebbe is asking that the order itself is something difficult. And the problem, says the Rebbe, we have is, I don't understand why when it comes to the walls, you read about the blemishes and you read about the purification. As opposed to the other two, you read about the blemishes and you take a break and then you come back to the purification. The Rebbe continue on. There is another unique factor that we find specifically with regard to tzara'at blemishes that appear on the walls of homes. At the outset, God informed the Jewish people, when you enter the land of Canaan, I will place a tzara'at blemishes in a home in the land that is your ancestral heritage. In other words, when it comes to the walls, tzara'at, God promises, when you enter the Holy Land, I will place, not if you discovered or if you find it. There is a uniqueness to the walls where God promises that he will do that. There are two seemingly opposite interpretations why these blemishes appeared. A, Rashi's commentary on the Torah and the Medrash both states, this, the Tzorah blemishes will come upon the homes, is favorable tiding for them because the Amorites hid treasures of gold inside the walls of the houses, and because of the blemishes, the Israelite owner would know to demolish the house and find them. So the Gemara, the Rashi and Medrash tell us that when you enter the Holy Land, God promises to have Tzora'at on the walls. You know why? The Amorites would hide, just like during the Holocaust. Now, many years later, people go and they dig in certain places to find hiding books, manuscripts, artifacts, or gold and treasures. When you enter the Holy Land, God wants us to find the treasures that were hidden by the previous landlords, and therefore God will put a blemish in the wall in the specific area where it will be discovered. So therefore it's beneficial as opposed to the other two. Yes. You have to break the wall. Before you destroy the home, you first knock out that section. If it appears again a second time, you knock it off again. If it appears the same time again, the third time, then you knock off the entire house. Okay. By the way, somebody showed me a medrash that it never happened. No, the Tzora'at on homes never actually happened. That's what I meant, right? So this is the first point. Rashi says that wall Tzora'at are for benefits of the Jewish people because God wants them to find treasures. B, the Zohar refers to the rationale stated previously so that they will find the treasures hidden in their homes, but afterwards states that a spirit of impurity rested in the Canaanites' homes because they were idol worshippers. Accordingly, God promises to place a Tzorah blemish in their home, in the land that is your ancestral heritage, so that the Jews would destroy the homes and thus remove the spirit of impurity. Afterwards, the Jews will build their homes with different stones and different earth, so that they would be able to live in holiness in a holy dwelling. Because the Jewish law is when you knock off that few bricks or stones, or the entire house, it has to be removed from the Jewish people. It has to be totally destroyed. You drop it off deep in the ocean, or you bury it below the ground. Huh? No. So the Zohar brings the first reason, but he adds more. He says the Canaanites, they used to worship idols, and sometimes they would dedicate the entire home. That home becomes impure, and a Jew cannot live in an environment of impurity. Therefore, God will make a miracle that they will destroy their homes, take away all the rocks, take away all the stones and earth, and rebuild a brand new home that's all pure. Therefore, it was for the benefit of the Jewish people. Thus, there are two different rationales for God afflicting the Jews' homes with Tzora'at blemishes. A, to make the abundance of good that was hidden in the house accessible, and B, to alert them in the negative to the negative spiritual quality, the spirit of impurity that was present there. Moreover, the undesirable influence of the impurity was so potent that the house had to be razed to eradicate it. So you have two reasons in summary. One is to make them aware of treasures, and two, to remove the spirit of impurity from the homes. Only Hashem does it, right? Right. You're right on target. Only Hashem knows. Therefore, He's the one who will find those homes that need to be raised, and He would put Tzora'as them. Furthermore, it is understood that by saying, I will place a Tzora'at blemish in a home, in the land that is your ancestral heritage, God does not mean that he would place tzora'at blemishes in all the homes of the land of Canaan. Were that the case, such a novel concept would have to be stated explicitly somewhere. It doesn't mean that God is going to destroy all the homes. Otherwise, he would say, I will cause you to destroy all the homes. Since such a reference does not exist, we can conclude that only a certain portion, and it stands to reason, only a small portion of the homes in Eretz Israel were afflicted by tzora'at blemishes. When God says he promises that it will happen, he is stating that it will happen to a very small number of homes. Most, if not all, of the Canaanites were idol worshippers, and in general their actions were more depraved than those of all the other nations. Thus, it would seem that a spirit of impurity rested in their homes. Why then did these tzora'as blemishes appear only in a small fraction of their homes, when they should have appeared in all the homes? So the Rabbi is asking, there is another thing we need to understand. The Torah says that the Canaanites were the worst idol worshippers than all the nations around. And that's why God says we must eradicate them, get rid of them. Why? Because their influence or impact upon Jewish people can be very harmful. And therefore, God drove them away from us. Either they can live by themselves or we're going to kill them. Now, if it's the case, why is it only few of them? It's not all of the Canaanites' home. Why shouldn't we, God tell us, destroy all the homes you're coming into? It doesn't say that. It says that when they enter the Holy Land, they enter straight into the homes that were built by the Canaanite. So that's one thing we need to understand. Yes, Harry?
Canaanites is a general term. Canaan, the Amorites, and other.
They're all subfamilies of the Canaanites, correct.
So you mentioned here only Amorites.
No, it mentioned that the Amorites had treasures. The impurity is Canaanites. But just like the Israelites, includes Dan, Asher, Benjamin, Joseph, Reuven, they're all families. The reason for this distinction is straightforward. There are different levels of the spirit of impurity, just like Harry said. When the spirit of impurity was not so great, it departed from their home as soon as the Jew and the holiness accompanying him entered the home. In particular, this was true since the house became his property, his home. Certainly, impurity was dispelled by his affixing a mezuzah on the doorpost of the home and the like. It was specifically in those homes where there rested a very severe form of impurity due to the extremely dissident conduct of the Canaanite in that home. Decadent? The tzora'at blemishes appeared. In such instances, it was necessary to destroy the house in order to remove this base impurity. Combining, so says the Rebbe, we need to make sure, we need to explain, we need to, therefore we must conclude that there were impurity everywhere. But when the Jewish family moved in, they put a mezuzah on every door, they do prayers, that majority of impurity is gone, run away, is not so powerful. But there were very few places where the power of impurity was so severe, so powerful that it wasn't removed. And therefore, God needed to bring the tzora'at to destroy the house so they can rebuild brand new, and there will be no impurity.
So it wasn't a command from Hashem that you must destroy this house. Hashem put the tzora'at to cause them to destroy the house.
Right.
So what's the difference with not a direct order? And
He's given us a choice. If you do not call a Kohen, you don't have to.
okay.
Combining both these explanations, it follows that the houses in which the treasures of gold were hidden were specifically those where the spirit of impurity rested in its most severe state. The Rebbe is putting the two together. The Rebbe says, why the tzora'at appeared? It was only to remove a very severe, powerful impurity. The other explanation, Tzarat appear why? Where the treasures are. And therefore it excludes majority of the homes. Therefore we can say something here clicks. You make a detective work. The Rebbe makes a detective and says something has to do with money. The treasures that are hidden perhaps are the one who contain all the powerful impurity that cannot be removed with affixing a mezuzah and saying prayers. And therefore God is going to make you break the wall. You find the money, you take the money to the bank, you rebuild a house, and you got rid of it. So there is a common denominator that the treasures hidden in the walls are the one who kept the severe power of impurity spirit from going away, and therefore only by destroying the house it goes. Any questions, Ali? These two extremes regarding the appearance of tzara'at blemishes in homes, that specifically the homes of the most decadent residents contain the hidden treasures of gold, share a similarity to the phenomenon of tzara'at blemishes as a whole. Says the Rebbe, now we can take that and drive it a little bit deeper into the general idea of tzara'at as it is applying to humans and garments as well. Tzara'at is indicative of one of the most severe types of impurity, as reflected in the law that a person afflicted by tzara'at must be isolated outside all three camps, that is, separated from the entire population. He must even be set apart from other impure people. As our sages say, other impure people should not dwell within him. Because tzara'at is the worst form of impurity, thus Sefer Yetzirah states, in evil there is nothing lower than tzara'at blemishes.
Complete separation.
We studied that last week in Tazria, that the tzara'at is the worst type of impurity because it has to be removed totally out of three camps. And in addition, he may not be socializing with someone in the same state of impurity that he is. Complete isolation, complete. Even the one, the closest to it, which is coming in contact with dead corpse, you may not enter the camp of Kohanim or Levites, but you can live with the Israelite camp. And in addition, you definitely can live with other people who are impure to dead corpse. Tzara'at is the only one that is so severe. Nothing is similar. That's why the book of Yetzirah, the book of creation, the most ancient book of Jewish tradition, said nothing is as powerful in impurity like tzara'at. Nothing, even not a dead corpse.
People with tzara'at stay with each other?
No, they themselves have to be totally separated.
Question: if a person chooses not to change to get improved and healed, will he back from that sickness of tzara, or it's?
I don't think it has to do with health.
So it's
In
just
other words,
repetition
it can be there forever.
until the old age and back.
Okay, I'm not sure.
Mm.
I think there is a set limit of times to be outside, but I'm not sure. Conversely, however, the intent of tzara'at blemishes is to bring about an ascent in the afflicted person, as Rambam rules, stating the following: as halacha of tzara'at blemishes are not a natural occurrence. Instead, they are a sign and a marvel that existed among the Jewish people to warn them against lashon hara, malicious gossip. God brings about a departure from the norm of creation, a tzara'at blemish, in order to motivate a Jew to teshuvah for the sin of lashon hara. That's why Rambam says that this is a direct event that was caused by God only, no way to explain it or to get rid of it with medicine. It's just God is sending us a reminder that we need to change the way we conduct ourselves in speech. Now, a Baal Teshuvah can reach a loftier level than a tzaddik. As our sages say, in the place where Baalei Teshuvah stand, perfect tzaddikim do not stand. In other words, a Baal Teshuvah, someone who repents and return back to God, they ascend to a much greater level than someone who never sinned. A tzaddik is very close to God. A rasha, a wicked person, is very far from God. But a rasha who turns back to God and say, I'm sorry, and changes his behavior, he jumps even higher than a tzaddik. Accordingly, it follows that even though in and of themselves, tzorah blemishes are the most severe form of impurity, and there is nothing lower than the tzorah blemish, they come to elevate a Jew to the very highest level, enabling him to become a Baal Teshuvah. We must explain that the purpose of tzorah is to cause a person to change and connect to God. But when they connect to God after they do Teshuvah, it is to a much closer standing than there was a tzaddik.
Because of a stronger connection?
What?
Because of a stronger connection from being.
A much stronger bond,
Yeah.
right? The next parenthesis, the Rebbe says that it's hinted to in the book of Yetzirah that the word tzara'at is nega. Nega is blemish. Pleasure, how do you say pleasure in Hebrew? Oneg Shabbat, the pleasure of food on Shabbat.
Yeah.
Ta'anug is pleasure. Oneg and nega are the same three letters, nun, gimel, and ayin, just the order is changed. In other words, from nega, from the worst impurity that can exist, it can bring the greatest pleasure because he ends up by doing the right thing, reconnecting to God, and therefore is closer to God.
But it shows the importance and the power of Shuvah.
Right. Exactly. But it also shows the gift of tshuva. In other words, God allows us to say, I'm sorry, but he's not just allowing us to go back to where we were, but much greater. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand about treasures. I'm going to read it. This is also the inner mystical explanation why the treasures of gold were granted to the Jews via tzorah blemishes, which were manifest specifically in the homes of those on the lower level, as explained above. This parallels the concept of tzorah blemishes as a whole. That is, specifically through the descent of tzorah blemishes, the lowest level, can one then ascend to teshuvah, the highest level. This concept was expressed in the apparent manner through the appearance of tzorah blemishes on the walls of homes. It would be apparent that the intent of the blemishes was to produce an ascent, and even an actual physical benefit. The Rebbe says now we can understand the treasures that are connected to tzorah. When you see the blemish, it seems that a degradation, that you are removed from God. It's a sign of impurity, the greatest impurity that can exist. But what it will lead to is finding treasures. In other words, there was something hidden you never had access to. Now you do. You can go on a 35-day cruise and not worry about paying the bills. That's the idea of returning back from tzorah. When you connect to God, the treasure that came out of it is something you couldn't have reached without. Without the descent, you cannot ascend much higher. And therefore, it's compared to treasure. Ali, now you understand that? Oh, I didn't, I'm glad. For this reason, the verse states explicitly, I will place a tzorah blemishes on the home in the land that you are ancestral heritage. The occurrence of tzorah blemishes in homes made it clearly apparent that from the outset, tzorah blemishes were brought down from above, as the verse states, I will place. They overtly revealed the opposite, the positive intent of the tzorah blemishes. And therefore, says the Rebbe, now we can understand why when it comes to the tzorah of walls, God says, I will place it. Because God wants us to come closer to him, and therefore he brings us down so we can jump higher. However, nevertheless, there is a point that still requires clarification. Why was it that specifically tzorah blemishes on the walls of homes were chosen to explicitly to exemplify this concept in an apparent manner. So Rabbi, we need to understand why this is the one that brings out how we can come closer to God through Teshuvah.
What's wrong with the blemishes on your body?
Right. That's a question.
The blemish on the hands that's destroyed is a reflection of the person living. Also, the whole town of seed is being destroyed.
It's part of the Teshuvah. Part of the Teshuvah to be embarrassed by his misbehavior and make a public statement that the way he conducted his life was inappropriate and he is going to change.
That's why I moved.
The rabbi is going to talk about the idea of sin can turn into mitzvot. How we have a term in Judaism that somebody can do teshuvah to such a deep level that the act of sin, turn into a positive sin, a positive mitzvah. How is it possible? And the rabbi is going to talk about the idea that you can go back in time and reverse the act in the past. That's the power of teshuvah, which is very unique and only God was able to give it to us. And therefore, now we're going to page 229. Based on all the above, it is possible to clarify the order of the passages discussing Tzorahas blemishes. Since Tzorahas blemishes reflect the ultimate of evil, in evil there is nothing below a Tzorahas blemish, as we study from the book of Yetzirah. There is no possibility for such a person to attain purification. While he is impure, he is entirely removed from any possible connection with a pure state. The purification of a person afflicted by Tzorah is an entirely new development achieved by the Kohen who brings about the purification. Therefore, the Torah alludes to this concept by distinguishing between the laws defining the Tzorahas blemishes that afflict a person and the laws explaining the purification process of such a person and presenting them in two separate Torah readings. This clarifies that the impurity of a person afflicted by Tzorah and his purification are two opposite states that are mutually exclusive. The Rabbi says, based on that, now we can understand something. When a person gets himself so low to speak Lashon Hara, he is totally removed from God. When he creates a wall and is removed from God, there is nothing that can be done. He's totally far away from God. Therefore, God says to him, go away. Go away from Israelite, from Levite, from Kohanim. Go away from other people like you. That's how bad it is. The idea of Teshuvah, to be able to break the past and turn it back, is so far from a human. It's only God can do it, and that has to be discussed only after we learn about the idea of teshuvah from the homes with the treasures and the revelation of the money of the treasures hidden, or the removal of the impure spirit in the homes. Says the Rebbe. However, 230, this conception applies only from man's point of view, as God sees it. From the very beginning, the sole intent of Tzorahas blemishes was to bring about purification from the undesirable qualities possessed by the person or object, and the subsequent ascent is explained in section 3. For this, now you understand, from a human point of view, you cannot change that. But from God's perspective, the reason he made the Tzorah and the human is to remind them and to bring them to reconnect to God, to come back. And therefore, for this reason, it is specifically with regards to Tzorahas blemishes, which are manifest on walls of homes, that it is written, I will place a Tzorahas blemish. And it is only with regards to them that it becomes overly recognizable that from the very beginning, they come to benefit the Jewish people. This stems from the unique quality that characterizes a Jewish home. Says the Rebbe, now we understand why the purification is only after you discuss the Tzorahas of homes, because in Tzorahas of homes, God says, I will place it. Why is God doing it? To find treasures. God does it for us to get rid of the impure forces that exist in the homes. In other words, it was all to bring the person closer to God. Now let's talk about purifying the human, because the human can purify and come closer to God than he was ever before. For this reason, I want to read about Yechida. This is a pure Kabbalah, but some of you have heard it before. In Chassidut, a distinction is made between a person's internal powers, the potentials, like thought and feeling that shines within an individual's conscious mind and are under his conscious control, and his encompassing powers, that is desire, pleasure, and faith, that transcend the soul's conscious control, encompasses it and elevate it to a higher level of functioning. The Rabbi says there is the revealed powers of the soul, like the way I speak, what I like, people, places, or the desires and my faith that are internal to the soul. Within these concepts, within these encompassing powers themselves, there are two levels, a makif, a karov, an encompassing light that is close, a level which, though transcendent, is still within reach and affected by the intellect, and makif arachok, an encompassing light that is distant, which in an ultimate sense refers to the Yechida, a soul level that is entirely transcendent, bound up with the essential godliness, and thus beyond the natural limitation of a person's conscious mind. The Rabbi is saying that makif is encompassing. That's called the hidden part of the soul, my faith, my desires, my thought. It's internally, nobody sees it. It's called makif. There is makif akarov, close makif, within the realm, and there is makif arachok, distant. Yechida is the fifth part of the soul. The soul is divided into 5 parts. Yechida is the one that's bound with God, so it's makif arachok. It's the encompassing part of the soul, but it's very distant from God. Says the Rebbe, this is what is reflected too by a home. A person has 3 garments. Food goes in, dressing outside, that's already encompassing, close encompassing, and the home is a farther encompassing. How do I know? Because to communicate with people, I don't have to be in my home. I need to have my clothes. I cannot be with other people without my clothing. But by homes, I can be in someone else's home. It's very far. Also, I can have many people in the house, and I'm in the house too. You cannot be wearing the same dress or outfit together with 5 more people. It doesn't work. That's why the Torah tells us that a complete human being is someone who has his own home, because the home is part of what defines the person. In a spiritual sense, it refers to Yechida. Yechida, the most powerful parts of soul that is with God. It's makif, encompassing, arachok, a further encompassing. Therefore, that's where God is starting to talk about the purification process. First, he's talking about the walls, because the walls of a house represent the distant makif that is very part of God. That's where it can all stem from. It starts from there to go back to the past, where past, present, and future don't exist. It's all one unit, and go back and tinker with it and connect to God to a much stronger bond. And therefore, now you can be purified, and after purification, you become a Baal Tshuva. You are becoming a penitent who is much closer to God. And that's the treasures that God is hiding in the homes. And that's why God promises. And that's why the purification process of homes and garments appears only after the homes, and that's why it's separated by two portions, because it's two opposites. The human perspective is in pure impurity, and the purification is from God process, Metzora. It has to be separated to a second portion. And I hope that was able to convey the points. Thank you very much. Have a good Shabbos.
Easy